The lion's mane from Sherlock Holmes. Throughout my long career, I had faced many problems, but none as perplexing as the one that confronted me, quite unexpectedly, right at my doorstep after my retirement. It struck me as one of life's peculiar ironies. While enduring the gloom of London, I had always longed for the quietude of the countryside, yet never managed to attain it. At last, however, I succeeded in retreating to a small house in Sussex. By that time, I had almost lost touch with Watson. We saw each other only occasionally, if he happened to visit on a weekend. For that reason, I was compelled to keep a record of my own cases. Ah, how I wished he had been with me during this one. How vividly he would have embellished the tale. How he would have delighted in recounting the extraordinary nature of the case and the many difficulties I overcame before reaching its triumphant conclusion. But as he was not there, I must tell the story in my own plain fashion, laying out, step by step, all the obstacles I encountered in what came to be known as the lion's mane case. My villa, perched upon the southern slope, commanded a splendid view of the channel. The coastline here consisted entirely of chalk cliffs, with access only by a long, steep, slippery, and rather trying path. The coves and hollows along the shore were refreshed with each tide, forming excellent natural pools for bathing. This magnificent stretch of coast ran unbroken for miles, interrupted only by the small village of Fulworth, nestled within a modest bay. My household was far from crowded. My elderly housekeeper, myself, and my bees were the sole occupants of the property. About half a mile away stood the well-known private school run by Harold Stackhurst. The establishment, called the Gables, was quite extensive, preparing a number of young men, under the guidance of several masters, for various professions. Stackhurst himself, once a distinguished oarsman, was now an admirable instructor in every respect. From the day I arrived, we had been on excellent terms, often visiting one another unannounced in the evenings. Toward the end of July in 1907, a violent storm swept across the channel. When it subsided, it left behind a series of lagoons at the base of the cliffs. On the morning in question, the storm had passed and the air was brilliantly clear. It was one of those days when work seemed impossible, so I set out before breakfast to enjoy the fine weather. I was descending the cliff path toward the shore when I heard my name called. Turning, I saw Harold Stackhurst waving cheerfully. "A fine morning, Mr. Holmes, is it not? I thought I might find you here. By the look of you, you are off for a swim." He laughed, tapping his bulging pocket. "Your old tricks again. Macpherson got there ahead of me. I shall join him shortly." Fitzroy Macpherson was the science master, a tall, well-built young man who, despite suffering from a weak heart due to a bout of rheumatic fever, retained the instincts of a born athlete. He excelled in all forms of exercise that did not overly strain him and was an enthusiastic swimmer, going out in all seasons. As I too enjoyed swimming, I would occasionally accompany him. At that very moment, we caught sight of Macpherson. First his head appeared over the edge of the path, then his whole body. He staggered forward like a drunken man, arms outstretched, and with a dreadful cry, collapsed face down upon the ground. He was perhaps 40 or 50 yards from us. Stackhurst and I rushed to his side and turned him over. The man was dying. His dim, sunken eyes and the dreadful flush upon his cheeks told their own story. Yet for a brief instant, consciousness returned to him, and he muttered a few words that were difficult to understand. However, the final phrase that escaped his lips in a shrill cry sounded unmistakably like the lion's mane. Though I could make little sense of it, I could not interpret it otherwise. With one last effort, he half raised himself, flung out his arms, and then fell sideways, lifeless. My friend stood frozen with shock, but I, as may be imagined, had all my faculties fully alert. Indeed, I needed them, for it was evident that we were faced with a most unusual case. The man wore only his coat, trousers, and shoes, the latter untied. As he had fallen, his coat had slipped aside, exposing his body, and what I saw there was most remarkable. His back was covered with red, wheel-like marks, as though he had been lashed with a thin whip. The instrument must have been both flexible and cruel, for the marks extended around his shoulders and across his ribs, inflamed and angry in appearance. In his agony, he must have bitten his lower lip, for blood trickled down his chin. While Stackhurst remained standing beside the body, I knelt to examine it more closely. At that moment, a shadow fell across us. Ian Murdoch had joined us. Murdoch was the mathematics master, a tall, gaunt, dark man, so reserved that he had scarcely any friends. He lived as though shut away in an ivory tower, rarely mixing with others. The students often mocked him, and there was something in his coal-black eyes and swarthy features that hinted at a volatile temperament. On occasion, his anger erupted into something approaching savagery. Once, irritated by McPherson's dog, he had seized the animal and hurled it out a window. That he retained his post was due only to his value as a teacher. Such was the man now standing beside us. Despite his strained relations with the deceased, he appeared genuinely shaken by the sight. Poor fellow, what can I do? How can I help? Were you with him? Can you tell us what happened? No, I was late this morning. I have not even reached the shore. I came straight from the Gables. What can I do? Go at once to the Fulworth police station and report what has happened. Without another word, he set off at a run. While Stackhurst, still stunned, remained by the body, I turned my attention to the investigation. First, I surveyed the shore for any sign of others. From the top of the path, I had a clear view of the entire stretch. Apart from one or two distant figures heading toward Fulworth, it was completely deserted. Satisfied that no one else was present, I began my descent. The ground underfoot varied between clay, chalk, and mixtures of both. The footprints told a clear story. Only one person had descended the path and returned. That morning, no one else had used it. At one point, there was the imprint of an open hand, evidence that poor McPherson had fallen and then struggled to his feet again. In several places, there were rounded impressions indicating that he had dropped to his knees more than once. At the foot of the path lay a large lagoon, left behind by the retreating tide. McPherson must have undressed there, for his towel lay upon a rock. It was dry and neatly folded, suggesting that he had never entered the water. Among the pebbles and patches of sand, I could make out both the impressions of his canvas shoes and, in places, those of his bare feet. Clearly, he had prepared to bathe, and here lay the crux of the matter. In all my experience, I had never encountered anything quite so strange. The man had been on the shore no more than a quarter of an hour. Of that I was certain, as Stackhurst had left the Gables shortly after him. He had come to swim, undressed, and then something had caused him to dress again in great haste. His clothing, hastily fastened and disordered, made that clear. He had either not entered the water at all, or, if he had not dried himself. And the reason? He had been subjected to a savage and inhuman scourging. The pain had been so intense that he had bitten his own lip until it bled, staggered back toward us in agony, and collapsed, dead at our feet. Who could have committed such barbarity? Though there were small caves and recesses at the base of the cliff, the sun, still low in the sky, shone directly into them, leaving no place for anyone to conceal themselves. A few figures could be seen in the distance along the shore, but they were far removed from the scene and could not have been responsible. Moreover, They were on the opposite side of the lagoon where McPherson had intended to bathe. 2 or 3 fishing boats were visible offshore, not far from land. We could question their occupants in due course. There were, indeed, several possible lines of inquiry, but none pointed clearly toward a definite conclusion. When I finally returned to the body, I found that a small, curious crowd had gathered. Stackhurst had not left his post. Ian Murdoch had returned as well, accompanied by Anderson, the village constable. Anderson was a large, sturdy man with red hair, the very image of a Sussex native. Beneath his calm and deliberate manner lay a notably sound and practical mind. After listening carefully and noting down everything we had to say, he drew me aside. "I would be grateful for your assistance, Mr. Holmes. This matter is beyond me. If I make a mistake, I shall have trouble with my superiors." I instructed him to notify his superiors at once and to summon a doctor. Nothing was to be disturbed, and he was to prevent, as far as possible, any fresh footprint from being made in the vicinity. Meanwhile, I had already examined the dead man's pockets. I found a handkerchief, a large knife, and a small card case. From the latter protruded a slip of paper. I withdrew it, unfolded it, and handed it to the constable. It bore a hastily written message in a woman's hand. "I shall certainly come there, Maudie." It was clearly a matter of the heart. An appointment had been arranged, though neither time nor place was specified. The constable replaced the note in the card case and returned it to the man's coat pocket along with the rest of his belongings. With nothing further to be done at that moment, I returned home for breakfast, having first instructed that the base of the cliff be thoroughly searched. Stackhurst came to see me an hour or 2 later. The body, he informed me, had been taken to the Gables, where the post-mortem would be conducted. He brought with him several pieces of definite information. As expected, nothing had been found in the small caves beneath the cliff. However, upon examining McPherson's papers, he had discovered intimate correspondence with a Miss Maud Bellamy, who lived in Fulworth. This, then, identified the author of the note found in the dead man's pocket. "The letters are with the police," he explained, "so I could not bring them. But from all appearances, there was a serious attachment between them. Still, I cannot connect this affair of the heart with such a dreadful murder, beyond the fact that the woman seems to have arranged a meeting with him. They would hardly choose a spot frequented by bathers for such a rendezvous," I observed. "It was mere chance that McPherson had no students with him this morning." "Was it chance?" Stackhurst frowned. "Ian Murdoch detained the boys," he said. "Insisted on working through some algebra problems before breakfast. The poor fellow seemed quite shaken. I gather he and the deceased were not on friendly terms. They had their differences once, but over the past year Murdoch has been as close to McPherson as he ever is with anyone. He is not, by nature, a sociable man. So I had gathered. You mentioned a quarrel over ill treatment of a dog. That matter was settled. Even so, he may have harbored a grudge. No, I'm certain they were on good terms. Very well. Then let us pursue this young woman. Do you know her? Everyone does. She is the most beautiful girl in these parts. Truly striking, Mr. Holmes. She attracts attention wherever she goes. I knew McPherson admired her, but I had no idea their acquaintance had progressed to letter writing. Who is she? The daughter of Tom Bellamy, who owns all the boats and bathing huts in Fulworth. He was once a fisherman, but has since prospered. He now runs the business with his son, William. Shall we go to Fulworth and speak with him? On what pretext? That will not be difficult. The poor fellow did not whip himself. If those wounds were inflicted by a lash, then there must have been a hand to wield it. In so isolated a place, the man cannot have had many associates. If we follow every clue, we may discover the motive for the crime. And once we have that, the identity of a murderer will not be far behind. The descent, scented with wild thyme, might under other circumstances have been most pleasant, but the tragedy we had witnessed that morning cast a shadow over everything. The village of Fulworth lay nestled in a crescent-shaped hollow along the bay. Behind the old settlement, upon the ridge, stood a number of more modern houses. Guided by Stackhurst, we made our way toward one of these. "Here we are," he said. "Bellamy calls it the Haven. A turreted house with a slate roof. Not bad for a man who started with nothing. Good heavens, look at that." A man had just emerged from the garden gate. Thin, disheveled. There could be no mistaking him. It was Ian Murdoch. A moment later, we found ourselves face to face. "Good day," said Stackhurst. Murdoch nodded, casting a furtive glance in our direction. He clearly intended to pass us by, but Stackhurst detained him. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Murdoch's face flushed with anger. "You may be my superior at the school, sir, but I was not aware that I owed you an account of my private affairs." Stackhurst, whose nerves had already been strained by the morning's events, might under other circumstances have exercised restraint. But his patience was exhausted. "That is an impertinent reply, Mr. Murdoch, and an impertinent question. This is not the first time you have overstepped yourself, but it will certainly be the last. You would do well to make other plans for your future at once. That is precisely my intention. Today, the only person who made the Gables tolerable has been taken from us." As Mr. Murdoch walked away, Stackhurst watched him with blazing eyes. Intolerable fellow. What a difficult man he is. I could not help but reflect that Ian Murdoch might well have seized upon the first available excuse to remove himself from the vicinity of the crime. Though still indistinct, certain suspicions were beginning to form in my mind. Our visit to the Bellamys might, perhaps, bring greater clarity. Once Stackhurst had regained his composure, we continued on our way. Mr. Bellamy was a middle-aged man with a red beard, and judging by the way his face matched the fiery hue of his hair, he was clearly in a state of agitation. "No, sir, I do not wish to hear the details." "My son feels the same," he said, gesturing toward the sullen, powerfully built young man seated in the corner. He never approved of Macpherson's interest in Maud. There was no talk of marriage, but there were letters, meetings, many things we did not approve of. My wife is dead. The girl has no one but her brother and me to look after her. And our intention is... He broke off abruptly as the girl entered the room. It would be no exaggeration to say that her beauty could enchant any gathering she entered. Who could have imagined that so rare a flower might take root and flourish in such surroundings? I have never been one to concern myself overly with women. My mind has always held dominion over my heart. But no man could behold those finely drawn features, that fresh, flower-like face, and emerge unscathed. Such was the young woman who now stood in the doorway, regarding us with keen, attentive eyes. "I have heard that Fitzroy is dead," she said. "Do not hesitate to tell me the details." "The other gentleman has already informed us," her father explained. "There is no reason for my sister to involve herself in this matter," the young man muttered. She turned a sharp glance upon him. "This is my concern, William. Kindly allow me to manage my own affairs. A murder has been committed. If I can help bring the murderer to justice, then I shall have done my duty to the man who is dead." As my friend briefly recounted the events, it became evident that she possessed not only beauty, but also remarkable strength of character. The composure of Maud Bellamy impressed itself upon my memory so deeply that I doubt I shall ever forget it. It was clear, too, that she recognized me by sight, for at last she turned to me and said, "Bring them to justice, Mr. Holmes. Whoever they are, do it. I will help you in any way I can." As she spoke, She cast defiant glances toward her father and brother. "Thank you," I replied. "In such matters, I place great reliance upon a woman's intuition." "You said them." "In time, everyone will know what has happened," I said. "There is no harm in speaking here. I would have preferred a private conversation, but since your father objects, he may remain." Referring to the note found in the dead man's pocket, I continued, "This will inevitably arise during the inquiry. Can you enlighten us about it?" "There is no need for secrecy," she said. "We were engaged and intended to marry. The only reason we kept it hidden was that Fitzroy's uncle, who is on his deathbed, might have disinherited him because of it." "You could have told us," Mr. Bellamy muttered. "I would have, if you had been more understanding, father. I cannot approve of my daughter associating with someone beneath her. It was precisely because of that prejudice that we could not tell you. As for the matter of the meeting," she felt inside her dress and produced a crumpled slip of paper. This was my reply. The note read, "My dearest, Tuesday, just after sunset, at our usual place on the shore. That is the only time I am free. FM. Today is Tuesday," she added. "We were to meet this evening." Turning the paper over, I observed it was not sent by post. "How did it reach you?" "I would rather not answer that question. It has no bearing on your investigation. I will gladly answer anything relevant." She did indeed respond to all our questions with frankness, yet we learned nothing that materially advanced the inquiry. She could think of no reason why her fiancé might have had a secret enemy, though she did not deny that she had many admirers. Was Mr. Ian Murdoch among them? She flushed slightly, clearly unsettled. "I believe he was once. But when he realized the nature of my relationship with Fitzroy, he withdrew." The cloud of suspicion surrounding this strange man began once more to thicken. It would be necessary to examine his records and perhaps conduct a discreet search of his room. Stackhurst shared my suspicions and was willing to cooperate. As we left the haven, we felt that we had at last grasped the first thread of this tangled skein. Yet even a week later, no meaningful progress had been made. Stackhurst had gathered what information he could about Ian Murdoch and had made a cursory search of his room, but without result. As for myself, though I reviewed every aspect of the case, both physically and mentally, I arrived at no new conclusions. Readers familiar with my work will know that I am not easily baffled. Yet in this instance, even my imagination seemed to fail me. Then came the matter of the dog. The news reached me first through my elderly housekeeper, one of those individuals who seem to possess an invisible network through which all village gossip flows. "One must feel sorry for what happened to Mr. Macpherson's dog," she remarked one evening. Ordinarily, I had little patience for such talk, but her words caught my attention. "What has happened to the dog?" "It has died, sir. Could not bear the loss of its master." "Who told you this?" "It is on everyone's lips. The poor creature had refused food for a week. Today, 2 young gentlemen from the Gables found it, dead on the shore. In the very spot where its master died, sir. In the very spot where its master died." The words struck my mind like a blade. The matter suddenly seemed worthy of close examination. That loyal animals sometimes die after their masters is no uncommon thing. But in the very spot? Why had it died on that desolate shore? Had it too fallen victim to the same mysterious agency? Could such a thing be possible? Though I was not yet certain, something had begun to take shape in my mind. Within minutes, I was on my way to the Gables. I found Stackhurst in his study, and at my request, he summoned the 2 boys, Sudbury and Blunt, who had discovered the dog. "Yes, sir, it was right beside the lagoon," said one of them. "It must have followed its master's trail." I examined the faithful animal, which lay upon a cloth in the hall. It was an Airedale Terrier. Its body was twisted and rigid, its limbs drawn tight, and its eyes bulged as though starting from their sockets. There could be no doubt it had suffered terribly. Leaving the gables, I made my way down to the lagoon. The sun had set, and the surface of the water, shaded by the cliff behind it, resembled a sheet of dull lead. Apart from two seabirds circling overhead with harsh cries, the place was utterly deserted. In the fading light, I could just make out the faint impressions of the small dog's tracks in the sand around the rock where its master had left his towel. I stood there for a long time, deep in thought. As the shadows lengthened, a multitude of ideas pressed upon my mind. It was like one of those dreams in which a man knows that what he seeks lies close at hand, yet cannot quite grasp it. At last, I turned away and began the ascent toward home. I had nearly reached the top of the path when, quite suddenly, the solution flashed upon me. Those who have read Watson's accounts will know that I possess a considerable archive. Though not arranged according to any strict scientific system, it serves my purposes well enough. My mind resembles a cluttered attic filled with boxes. I do not always know precisely what each contains, yet I was certain that somewhere within it lay the key to this case. I had not yet solved the mystery, but at last I knew what must be done. The possibility forming in my mind was both dreadful and extraordinary, yet it was a possibility and one that must be tested. The attic of my small house was crammed to the rafters with books. I spent a full hour turning the place upside down before finally emerging with a volume bound in brown and silver. Rapidly turning the pages, I found the passage that had lingered dimly in my memory. It pointed to a wild, almost impossible hypothesis, yet I could not rest until I had tested it. By the time I had finished and retired for the night, it was already late. I looked forward eagerly to the task I had set for the following morning. However, events did not proceed as I had planned, and my intentions were interrupted in a most unwelcome fashion. I had just finished my early tea and was preparing to set out for the shore when Inspector Bartle of the Sussex Constabulary called upon me. He was a large, heavy, slow-moving man, yet clearly possessed of considerable strength. He regarded me with troubled eyes as he began to speak. "I should be glad of the benefit of your great experience, sir," he said. "Unofficially, of course. I find myself quite at a loss over this Macpherson case. I hesitate whether or not to make an arrest." "You refer to Mr. Ian Murdoch?" "Yes, sir. He is the only man I can lay hands on. In so isolated a place, one does not have far to look. Who else could it be? What evidence have you against him?" He had followed much the same lines of reasoning as myself. Murdoch's peculiar temperament naturally aroused suspicion. A man capable of sudden fits of violent anger, such as when he had ill-treated the dog, could not be lightly dismissed. His past quarrel with Macpherson also weighed against him. Nor was there any reason to suppose he would view Macpherson's relationship with Miss Bellamy with favor. His reasoning was sound enough, yet he had little to add beyond the fact that Murdoch had begun making preparations to leave. With so much against him, the inspector said anxiously, "What would become of me if I let the man slip through my fingers?" "There are serious gaps in the case," I replied. "He can account for his whereabouts on the morning of the crime. He was with his pupils until shortly before Macpherson appeared, and followed us soon after. You must also consider that such brutality could scarcely have been inflicted by one man upon another of equal strength. And finally, we have yet to determine the nature of the instrument that caused those injuries. It must have been a whip or something of that sort. Have you examined the marks?" "Of course. The doctor has as well. I have studied them closely with my lens. They are most curious." "In what way, Mr. Holmes?" I took up an enlarged photograph from my desk. "This is my method in such cases," I explained. "I have no doubt you conduct your work thoroughly, Mr. Holmes. I cannot have come this far otherwise. Now let us consider this mark along the right shoulder. Do you observe anything? I cannot say that I do. The marks are not uniform. Here, there is a break in the skin, blood has been drawn. And here again, and on this other welt as well. What do you make of that? I have no idea. What do you make of it? I am not yet certain. But I shall be soon. Once we identify the instrument, we shall be closer to identifying the culprit. It may be a foolish suggestion, said the inspector, but if a heated grill had been pressed against the back, the more pronounced marks might correspond to where the bars meet. An ingenious idea. And what would you say to a cat o' nine tails with small, hard knots upon the cords? Good heavens, Mr. Holmes, that seems most plausible. Or maybe something entirely different, Mr. Bartle. But one thing is certain. Your evidence is far too slight to justify an arrest. And you must not forget, the dead man's final words were the lion's mane. Perhaps he meant Ian. I considered that. Had the second word resembled Murdoch, there might have been something in it. But it did not. He cried the words aloud, and I am quite certain the second word was mane. Have you no other theory, Mr. Holmes? Perhaps. But I prefer not to speak until I have something more definite. And when might that be? Within the hour, perhaps even sooner. The inspector stroked his chin and regarded me skeptically. I should like to know what is passing through your mind, Mr. Holmes. Could it have something to do with those fishing boats? No, they were too far away. Then perhaps Bellamy and his son? After all, they were hardly fond of Mr. Macpherson. No, I said with a smile. You shall not extract a word from me until matters are clearer. For now, we both have work to do, Inspector. If we might meet here at noon. I had scarcely finished speaking when the incident occurred that marked the beginning of the end. The front door of my house burst open, and hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. A moment later, Ian Murdoch staggered into the room. The man was deathly pale. His clothes were disordered, and with bony hands clutching at the furniture, he could barely keep himself upright. With a desperate effort, he gasped, "Brandy! Brandy!" and collapsed upon the sofa. He was not alone. Close behind him came Stackhurst, breathless and disheveled, hatless, and scarcely in better condition than Murdoch himself. "Yes, give him brandy," he cried. "The man is at his last breath. I barely managed to bring him here. He collapsed twice on the way." Half a glass of brandy did him immediate good. Propping himself up on one arm, he shrugged his coat from his shoulders. "For God's sake, oil, opium, morphine," he groaned. "Do something, anything, but stop this unbearable pain." The inspector and I could not suppress a cry at the sight before us. Murdoch's back bore the same net-like pattern of red welts as Fitzroy Macpherson's. It pointed unmistakably to the same killer. The pain must have been excruciating, spreading across his entire body. At intervals, his breathing faltered, his face darkened, and then he would gasp harshly, clutching at his heart while beads of sweat poured down his brow. Death seemed very near. As we forced more brandy down his throat, he rallied slightly. Cotton soaked in oil appeared to ease the strange wounds. At last, his head sank back upon the pillow. His exhausted body had found temporary refuge in that safe harbor between sleep and unconsciousness, and though he was not fully aware, the worst of his agony had subsided. He was in no condition to answer questions, but once we were satisfied that the immediate danger had passed, Stackhurst turned to me in distress. "My God," he cried. "What is this, Mr. Holmes? What is it? Where did you find him?" "On the shore, at the very spot where poor Macpherson died. Had his heart been as weak as Macpherson's, he would not be here now. I thought him dead twice on the way. The Gables were too far, so I brought him here. Did you see him while you were on the shore?" I heard his cries as I walked along the cliff. He was staggering like a drunken man near the lagoon. I ran down at once, threw something over him, and brought him here. For heaven's sake, Mr. Holmes, use all your skill. Lift this curse from us, for life has become unbearable. You are a man of worldwide reputation. Can you do nothing? I think I can, Stackhurst. Come with me. And you as well, Inspector. Let us see whether we can catch this murderer. Leaving the unconscious man in the care of my housekeeper, the three of us set off at once toward the fatal lagoon. Murdoch's clothes and towel lay in a small heap upon the pebbles. I led the way as we approached the water. The pool was shallow in most places, though near the base of the cliff it reached a depth of nearly 5 feet. Any swimmer would naturally choose that deeper section, where the water lay clear and green. Along the upper edge of the lagoon ran a line of rocks, and we walked along them in single file, peering down into the water below. As my gaze swept the deepest part of the pool, I suddenly gave a cry of triumph. "Cyanea!" I shouted. "Cyanea! A jellyfish! Look, there is the lion's mane." What I pointed to did indeed resemble a severed mass of a lion's mane. It rested upon the flat rock beneath the water, some 3 feet below the surface. From a mass of yellow, curling tendrils extended long, silvery filaments that swayed and pulsed continuously. The creature expanded and contracted in a slow, dreadful rhythm. "That is enough. It is finished," I cried. "Help me, Stackhurst. We must destroy this killer once and for all." A large rock lay upon a ledge above the lagoon. Together we forced it over the edge. It fell with a heavy splash into the water. When the ripples subsided, we could see it resting upon the bottom. From beneath it, a yellowish membrane still quivered. The killer lay crushed beneath the stone. Oily foam seeped out and spread slowly across the surface. "Good heavens!" exclaimed the inspector. "What was that, Mr. Holmes? I was born and raised here, and I have never seen such a thing. I did not think such creatures existed in Sussex." "Fortunately, they do not. At least, not ordinarily," I replied. "It must have been driven here by a southwesterly wind. Now, let us return to my house and hear what it is like for a man to face such a deadly peril." When we entered my study, we found Murdoch considerably recovered. He was able to sit upright, though still shaken and subject to occasional spasms of pain. He managed to recount, in broken sentences, what had happened. He remembered nothing of the moment when the creature had attacked him, nor how he had managed to reach the shore. Taking up the small book, I said, "The key to this mystery, one that might otherwise have remained unsolved, lies here." The volume was by the well-known observer J.G. Wood, entitled Out of Doors. Wood himself had encountered this dreadful creature and had nearly lost his life, and thus spoke with authority. The Latin name of our murderer is Cyanea capillata, more deadly than a cobra, and capable of inflicting even greater agony. Allow me to summarize Wood's account. If a swimmer encounters a rounded mass resembling a lion's mane or a sheet of gilded paper, formed of brownish-orange membrane and fibers, he must exercise the utmost caution, for this is the highly dangerous creature known as Cyanea capillata. Could the creature be more accurately described? He goes on to recount how, while swimming off the coast of Kent, he was struck by its nearly invisible filaments, which may extend in a radius of 15 meters. Any who enter that radius are in mortal danger. Even at that distance, Wood was nearly killed. The thread-like appendages left red lines upon the skin. On closer inspection, these lines consisted of numerous small blisters. Each tiny point seemed to contain a needle reaching into the nerves. The pain at the point of contact was the least of it. It felt as though bullets were striking my chest. My pulse ceased, and then my heart seemed to leap violently within my chest 6 or 7 times. Despite encountering it in the open sea, where the water is constantly in motion, he barely survived. He wrote that when he looked in the mirror afterward, he scarcely recognized his own face, so swollen and distorted it had become. He swallowed a bottle of brandy, and that, it seems, saved his life. There is the book, Inspector. You may keep it. It describes perfectly what befell poor McPherson. And clears me at the same time, said Ian Murdoch with a faint, ironic smile. I do not blame you, Inspector or Mr. Holmes. Anyone in your position would have thought the same. It is a strange twist of fate that I should be exonerated only by sharing my poor friend's suffering on the very brink of arrest. No, Mr. Murdoch, I said. I was already on the verge of the solution. Had I left the house at the hour I intended, I might even have spared you this ordeal. But how did you know, Mr. Holmes? I am a voracious reader and possess a curious memory for small details. The phrase lion's mane had been troubling me. I knew I had seen it somewhere, in an unrelated context. You will have noticed the resemblance yourself. McPherson must have seen the creature drifting upon the surface. There could be no more fitting description of his killer. Murdoch slowly rose to his feet. Now that I am cleared, it is time I explained certain matters, he said. I had some idea how your investigation was proceeding. It is true that I once cared deeply for Miss Bellamy, but when she chose my friend McPherson, my only wish was for her happiness. It was enough for me to assist them, to carry their messages and act as their confidant. I had done so many times. That is why I hastened to inform her personally of his death. I feared that if another told her bluntly, it might break her entirely. She withheld this from you out of concern, for both your judgment and my safety. But if you will permit me, I should like to return to the Gables. I find I have a strong desire for my bed. Stackhurst extended his hand. We have all been under great strain, he said. Let us forget what has passed, Murdoch. In future, we shall understand one another better. Arm in arm, like old friends, they set off together toward the Gables. The inspector and I were left alone in the room. After studying me silently for a moment, he spoke. You have done it, he cried. I have read accounts of your work, but always thought them exaggerated. You were magnificent. I inclined my head in acknowledgement, though in truth such praise did little to satisfy me. At the outset, I was lamentably slow. I cannot forgive myself for that. Had the body been found in the water, I should not have missed it, but the towel misled me. The poor fellow had not even thought of drying himself, yet I assumed he had never entered the water. How, then, could I suspect the attack of a marine creature? That was my error. I have, at times, jested at the expense of the police, but in this case, Cyanea Capillata very nearly avenged Scotland Yard.